Today we're going to interview Kim Kanary. She has been the VP of Marketing at so many cool brands. And today we're going to talk about her career path, how she has been promoted several times and really owning that executive level. We're going to talk about how she builds her teams, what she's looking for when she interviews people, and how you can get job offers from your interviews. There's so much good information here about getting into the workplace and getting promoted and what you need to do to make sure you're getting to your full potential. So let's dive on in. Welcome, Kim Kanary. Kim, thank you so much for speaking with us today. The first question I ask everybody is just what was your college major and what was your first job out of school?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's great to be here. My college major was communications, and I actually was just shy of a criminal justice minor. And the reason I had those different paths was I did debate when I was in college between a communications career or becoming an attorney. And so all of the law classes at my undergrad kind of fell in that criminal justice minor. So I took all of the law classes and all of the communication and business classes I could so that I could assess that direction. And my first job actually was I had an internship that I ended up keeping through about a year that I spent in between undergrad and grad school before pursuing grad school and then through grad school, which was at a nonprofit called the National Multiple Sclerosis Society. And the amazing thing about working for a nonprofit is you get to wear a lot of hats. And so I got to do a lot of different things and get exposed to different angles of the business. So that was really great, along with leveraging my communication skills. And then my first corporate job was actually in public relations with the JM Smucker company. So working on brands like Smucker's, Jif, Crisco, Pillsbury baking products, that kind of thing.
So, my next question is actually like how clear was your career direction when you're coming out of college? And it sounds like you started down two different paths. How did you end up choosing the path that you went down?
I was pretty clear, but by the time I finished my education, but yeah, during college and even in high school, I was debating on what path to go down. And for me, it was about taking different classes to get exposure to different areas. It was about having internships so that I could truly get a sense of what do I really enjoy. We spend a lot of time in our careers and working, and so I really just wanted to decide where do I see myself spending my career many years ahead. Ultimately, I fell in love with that communications path. And frankly, in the business world, having a little bit of legal understanding is super helpful because we review contracts and things like that. So both paths have benefit. And I think even when you're debating, that's the beauty of it is you're going to have takeaways from every path that you debate that's still probably going to help you in your career.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I love the idea of spreading out and learning as much as possible and experimenting, right? You don't have to stay on one path, even if your first job is this one thing. It doesn't mean you have to have your next job be that or down the line. So, you were at the nonprofit and you were at Schmucker's. What do you think surprised you most about entering the workforce?
I think a couple things. One is it takes some time to build some confidence. And so I think we in college, you have this clear path. You do your assignments, you do your testing, your papers, whatever it may be, you get your grades. It's very kind of a clear path. In the business world, it's not always so clear. And so I think one thing is just building confidence takes time. But even when you have that little like nagging, voice in your head, at least conveying confidence where you can, even if it's a quiet confidence, can be really powerful. And I think another big surprise is just the fact that education and those skills, the things that you've developed over time alone aren't enough. You need to navigate relationships and build relationships. You need to collaborate. You need to listen and absorb and learn. And so there's all of these soft skills that come into effect that I think in theory, but in action, it's much more complicated than I think you necessarily initially realize.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's like I talk about all of those things all the time because the soft skills can really get you hired or promoted when your hard skills maybe can't. And that confidence, I think, comes with action. So you have to have the actions before the confidence, right? It's not the other way around. But you use the word clarity. So if you are a recent grad, you're going into your first job, you're right, you don't have the structure, you don't have a teacher telling you what to do or a syllabus. How do you recommend that people early in their career start to build that clarity in the workforce?
It's about being curious and again, leveraging those soft skills, asking questions, being curious, raising your hand and volunteering for new opportunities. All of those things help you find that clarity. Another thing that I did early in my career that was incredibly helpful, and this kind of goes back to our previous conversation about finding the right path as well, is I did informational interviews. So I reached out to professionals that I thought, wow, they have an amazing career or an amazing background. I would love to learn from this person. And I just reached out and asked to have a short conversation, pick their brain, get their advice, and just really be a sponge. Just absorb as much as you can. And over time, that clarity comes. And it's fine if it doesn't come immediately, as long as you're taking steps to try to find it, to learn, to absorb, to be exposed to as many different people and styles and paths, if you're still debating, as possible, so that you can ultimately find that clarity.
I think a lot of young people tend to think I can't ask for people's time. People are so busy, they don't know me necessarily. Why would they agree to talk with me for an informational interview or coffee? But I think I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm guessing that you would say the same thing as me. We were helped along the way, and so we're more than happy to have conversations with people so that we can pay it forward, right, or pay it back. So don't be afraid to ask for those informational interviews or coffee dates because people are willing to help.
I totally agree. And I think most people genuinely do want to help because, like you said, we were helped along the way. I will say we're all super busy, and especially the more senior level we get, the more directions we're pulled in. And so don't be discouraged if you send an email or make a call and don't immediately hear back. Follow up, be persistent. Of course, don't be obnoxious about it. Don't be rude.
Right.
Don't be frustrated. Be persistent. Send some follow ups respectfully. And it's probably just that person was like, oh, yeah, I'll get back to this. And then a million other things came their way and they just hadn't had the chance to yet. But that persistency is a good lesson as well, that persistency and consistency. And then also it just gives that person that opportunity to keep you top of mind and actually have the time to get back to you.
Yeah. And it can feel like a risk reaching out to people. So, what risks do you think, maybe other than reaching out to people, did you take early in your career that really paid off?
I would really say this goes back to raising your hand and volunteering, even when you're a little bit uncertain. I'll share a quick story actually. Fairly early in my career, I was in a situation, I had an opportunity where I could have pursued couple different paths where my boss had left the company and there wasn't really a great plan in place of who was taking on these responsibilities. And so I found myself volunteering. I'll take this on. I'll do that. I don't know how to do this, but I'm going to ask questions and figure it out and get it done as long as you can tolerate my questions that I'm asking and things like that. And that experience, even though I think one, it was scary, but it was also exciting because I was taking on things that they were way over my level of experience. And I learned so much by doing that. One, overcoming that nervousness of stepping forward, asking the questions, putting yourself out there. Two, just figuring out how to learn things and navigate that space when it's complex and it's fast moving and there's uncertainty. And just that really helped propel me, I think, in my career by just raising my hand. And that's maybe more of a unique or extreme example that doesn't always happen, but you can do that in little ways. There
Mhm.
are task forces that businesses have or committees that they have. You can volunteer to participate on those, and that gives you exposure to other people, other areas. And so even things like that, or that little project that somebody's, hey, anybody want to take this on? If not, I'll pick or I'll assign it. But if anybody wants to volunteer, being that person
Yeah.
is not only does it differentiate you in the workplace as somebody who's always willing to step up, but you learn so much.
Yeah. I work in a smaller company and it was nobody's job to do sales. And so I literally had no sales training whatsoever. It scared me so much to even think about doing it, but I was like, okay, I'll do it. And it impacted my career so much. So, to your point, look for the things that maybe it's nobody's job to do, or the little places that you can raise your hand when nobody else is. And it really will make you stand out because that impacted my entire career. So, it sounds the same for you.
Absolutely.
And looking at your LinkedIn profile, you've done so much. You worked on really cool brands. You have you and Mario Lopez up there. So talk us through your career path, after Smuckers, what happened?
So within my career, because I was that person that was volunteering to take on the extra project, to join the extra committee or whatever, I found myself adding responsibilities with every promotion, with every new role I took on. There was pretty much something new that I absorbed and that I took on and learned through those experiences. So I have worked in a range of industries. I started in that CPG space, consumer packaged goods, as I mentioned, with Smuckers and Jif and all of those brands. But I've worked across real estate. I've worked in banking at a Fortune 500 bank for a short time. I've worked in retail. I was in jewelry retail for about 13 years. And so I've done a lot of different industries, which is, again, incredible from that learning perspective of just different exposures where you have that foundational path and skill set and knowledge set that you can build upon because you almost have to take different perspectives with each different industry and role. But yeah, for me, it was just an opportunity. Every time I could take something new on, I was excited to learn it. I was excited to tackle it, sometimes a little scared, but never willing to necessarily admit that in the moment. And those are the things that make such a big difference as you're growing in your career. And again, every step of the way, being able to do different things and to push the envelope. And that was really what helped me just continuously grow. And I think even when we become more advanced in our careers or we have more years of experience, continuously finding those opportunities to learn, whether it's a new business or just a new area, or learning about what your colleagues are doing so that you can better relate to them in your business. Just always looking for those learning opportunities.
Oh, yeah. Being a lifelong learner is so important to me. That's where I'm at. I learn something new every day. And that's, I think, important personally, just to keep yourself engaged with your role. But you continuously raise the bar on what you are providing the company, and people will notice that. And your name will come up in conversations for things of leadership opportunities, leading a project, leading a team, promotion. So I love that you said that. So you, within your career, you have led teams, you've built teams. Let's talk a little bit from that perspective. If you were going to hire somebody, maybe they're an entry level person or early in their career, let's say, what do you think helps somebody stand out during an interview?
So that's where those soft skills that we talked about, I think, become super important. But I would say practice. It may feel weird, it may feel silly, but actually go through and rehearse questions that you think you get and say the answers out loud. Because sometimes what we say in our heads, when once we verbalize it, it doesn't quite have that same effect, or we're like, oh, that didn't sound as good as I thought it would. And so, one, go in super prepared and have questions that you ask, genuine questions, not just, oh, I'm going to Google a couple things and ask some questions because this is what I'm supposed to ask, but genuine curiosity about the role and the company and things like that. So be prepared, practice saying things out loud. I would even say this is something I learned in crisis communications training actually, is record yourself and watch it back. Most of us hate to see ourselves and hear ourselves because we sound different in our heads and that, but it is so helpful because we all have these little hidden things that we don't necessarily realize, a little mannerism, a gesture, maybe we say, or have those different little filler words that we use a lot. And we are so just used to communicating on a day-to-day basis that we don't even realize it sometimes. I had one employee years ago that I was helping her with her communications and public speaking skills. And she said, all the time. And so we put this little just fun thing in place where every time she said, I said umbrella, like umbrella. And so she would be like, and I'd go, umbrella. And at some point she started to realize it and she would be like, umbrella, darn it, I said it again. And so she started to become aware. But unless you have that little trigger that kind of points you to it, or you've actually watched yourself, many times we're just not aware of those little things. Or maybe you look up when you're thinking, maybe you cover your mouth, maybe you twist your hair, maybe, whatever it would be. But there's maybe things that we don't realize that actually watching ourselves can help. So again, that's a very long-winded way to say preparation is super important. Be self-aware is very important. And those questions can be nerve-wracking. So having practiced and prepared can also help us to be a little bit less nervous in those situations.
I would say that almost everybody has something, right? You say, I know early in my career, I used to do that thing where you say so after your answers. So you're just like, and so, and then like there's something that
And you
follows and it
trail
makes
off.
no sense. Yes, like that was terrible. Everybody has something is the point. So if it's pointed out to you or you notice it about yourself, don't feel bad. It's an opportunity for growth. So I think that people tend to take feedback almost as like an insult, and that is not the case whatsoever. It's actually an investment in your future. And I love that you are investing in your employee and making it even sort of fun or sort of a game too. So it was fun to get better and things like that. So if you can implement that with yourself or your team or with a partner, any of that stuff will be so helpful when you go into those tough conversations. And then once you get the job and you're communicating within the company, you having those strong communication skills is probably going to take you further if you want to get into leadership and stuff like that, then maybe your hard skills will. So that was wonderful. And I appreciate that answer so much. For the person who is on the earlier side of the career, maybe they're just their very first job and they're saying, man, I just don't have a lot of experience right now. What's your advice for going into a job interview the first time, not having corporate experience? What can you do to make sure that you're still somebody that deserves to be hired?
Yeah, I think it's actually a lot of what we just talked about. It's being prepared, it's being curious and wanting to learn, it's having a positive attitude, being that positive can do type of
Yeah.
person, showing that you're interested in learning and that you're going to be a hard worker. I mean, those kind of things are meaningful, they stand out. And having, again, those right questions that you ask, that shows that you've been thoughtful about the process. It signals to that interviewer that kind of deeper thinking, that you're really taking this seriously, that you're absorbing, that you're doing research on the company, and that you've come prepared. And that kind of signals to them the type of employee that you will be. And so I would say, again, just being prepared, doing your research, having thoughtful questions, things like that can really make you stand out. And again, if you do that practice where you can hone in on your communication skills as well and articulate the areas where you have, think about, okay, I don't have this experience, but I took this class and we did this project where we had to do the same thing or something similar, and use those examples to show maybe you don't have the business world experience, but based on your education or even internships are great, or volunteer opportunities. You can learn such amazing things in volunteer opportunities that you can use those examples to show that you at least know how to approach those new things, or that you have the right skill set to learn and to be that valuable employee.
Yeah. Let's flip it. What kind of mistakes have you seen people make in interviews?
Not knowing anything about the company or role, or very little about it. I think also a lot of times not understanding or not being aware of those little signals
Mm-mm.
that we talked about, whether it's a filler word like or if it's a little mannerism that we don't necessarily notice about ourselves, things like that. And then I guess on the flip side is taking where you're trying to project confidence and you're almost trying too hard to where it flips to arrogance, or at least that's how it's perceived. So always having that balance, being very self-aware, being confident but not arrogant, asking questions but not monopolizing the conversation, all of that is balance. Sometimes those come with that practice and preparation. Sometimes it comes with time. But again, the more you're thinking about these things and trying to be prepared and thoughtful about the situation, the better positioned you'll be.
I think a lot of women, especially, aren't as confident as they could or should be, even when they are qualified. So, what helped you build confidence before you had the big titles?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that there's a difference between being qualified and confident. And you can have the credentials and the confidence are two separate things. So you may have the credentials, but the confidence takes longer to build. And so I think, again, relying on your credentials, understanding that you're bringing value to the table, that little voice in your head telling it to go away or to be quiet when it's like putting those little seeds of doubt in your head, just really focused, being focused on the task at hand, the opportunity that the thing that you need to learn or the opportunity that you're facing, the challenge that you're facing, and really just trying to think through how to overcome challenges, how to leverage the skills you have, how to continuously build on them, and letting yourself appreciate your wins as confidence building opportunities, and then not beating yourself up over your losses or your challenges. That's a big thing. Take failures or faults or criticism as learning opportunities and move forward. And so I think a lot of times we beat ourselves up over those things. We dwell on them. They run around in our heads longer than anybody else's. And so making sure that you just say, okay, I messed up, or this thing happened, or whatever it is. What's the lesson? How can I do better next time and prevent this kind of thing from happening? And then be done with it. And that's easier said than done, of course. But if you force yourself to think that way, it really does help overcome those challenges and learn from the situation and build that confidence. And sometimes you almost just have to project confidence outwardly before you fully feel it inwardly. And so that's a big piece of it. Just practice being confident, and eventually you're like, oh, I actually do feel this way. And so that's another great little tool or tactic that you can use.
Say you are in your role, you've been invited to meetings, there's higher ups in this meeting. How do you go into that and feel like you can have a voice at that table without feeling like too much?
Great question. There's a book called Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg that is, I think, phenomenal for particularly women, maybe younger or earlier in their careers to read, because it does talk about a lot of those things about having a seat at the table, not, going at the row behind the table and letting everybody else fill in around you, things like that. So I would say look for resources like that can help you, but also read the room, maybe chat with your boss ahead of time, because your boss wants you to look good too. They want you to be set up for success. And so maybe chat with your boss ahead of time, especially if you don't know the players in the room, and find out, is this the avenue to ask questions and throw out ideas, or is this a little bit more maybe structured or that kind of thing, and should I follow up with you after? And just understand, because there are definitely avenues in meetings where you want to be the person, not always the first person, but you want to be a person that speaks up, that isn't sitting there just quietly observing everything. But you also don't want to monopolize and be the person that's every time something's said, you're the first person jumping in with it. And so understanding that balance, and people can help with that. But you want to make sure that you have a presence, that you are presenting yourself confidently, whether you talk a little bit or a lot, and that if you do have questions that you're not comfortable maybe asking in the room, make a note of them and follow up. Ask your boss or ask somebody in a more private setting afterwards. And again, eventually over time, you'll find that confidence. Or again, maybe that wasn't the right avenue, and by making a note of it and following up, that was a good decision. These dynamics are complicated, and so I think it's always good to ask for a little guidance, and then go in and really just use your judgment, listen actively, understand, try to assess people's styles so that you can present yourself in the best way.
Yeah, reading the room is such like a skill that you can hone over time, but it is super important to be able to read the room. And I interviewed another woman who said if you are invited to the table, it's your responsibility to use your voice. So I love that idea. But what I really like, what you said, is check with your boss or use your resources so that you understand the framework of what you're walking into before you start using your voice. So that I think was really smart, and I hadn't thought about that before.
Say too, sometimes that confidence starts to get in our heads and we're thinking of a question and we know it's a good question, but then we start second guessing it. And by the time we sit there and assess and debate, should I ask it, should I not? Then somebody else asks it and you're like, darn it. But I think it's also important to step a little bit outside of your comfort zone. But again, being thoughtful and mindful about when you do that and how frequently you do it based on the room.
Yeah. So over your career, you've had some really impressive titles. You've been at the VP level, at the C-suite level. What do you think healthy ambition really looks like, and what does that look like to you?
There's not a one size fits all answer here. Everybody has their own path and their own ambitions and desires. And so, one is just staying true to yourself, understanding what you really want out of your career and what you're willing to do to get there from the perspective of getting to those senior level positions and the senior VP, C suite type of level, VP level. It requires sacrifice. It requires long hours. It requires sometimes you to be available at times when you'd really rather not be available or whatever it may be. And so, understanding, am I willing to make those sacrifices and to put in the extra time? And if you're not, ask yourself, am I okay with X level of achievements? And if you are, that's fine. Not everybody needs to be an executive. And maybe you don't want to manage people, for example. I love managing teams, but not everybody does. And that's okay. You don't have to want to manage people. You may just say, I'm happy where I am. I'm enjoying these responsibilities. I want to have my free time undisturbed. And so that's what it is. And so I think finding what matters most to you, but even when you're leaning on that side of more, I don't want to say more ambition, but more like sacrifice and willingness to do those things to achieve the things in my career because I am very career oriented. But when you're like that, then it's important to find balance.
The opposite way.
So you don't get burnt out. So again, it's all about really understanding and thinking through and making sure that you're taking care of yourself along the way as well. So maybe you're willing to make those sacrifices, put in the extra time, all of those things, but don't let yourself become the sacrifice along the way. Yes, you can put in the extra time, but if you're starting to feel unhealthy or tired or burnt out, that's when you need to say, okay, I need to take a beat here and just either pause or take a breath or take a day or two and reset.
Yeah, 100%. I think we all need to figure out what that balance really looks like, and make sure that our health and our mindset, our sanity is the priority, even when we are super career oriented like you and I are. But as you are climbing the ladder, if you're looking for your first promotion or a raise, negotiation can feel so scary for somebody, whether they've done it 100 times or even the very first time. It can just feel like something that is just this monumental task. What is your best advice for going in and asking for the thing?
So I actually love negotiating, whether that's advocating on behalf of myself or even just negotiating contracts in the business space is obviously where I would use it more frequently. To me, some advice to take away is don't be afraid to ask. If you don't ask you and you don't advocate for yourself, it may not happen unless you get really lucky, but that's the exception, not the rule. So one, just don't be afraid to ask. Two, if you have a mentor or best friend, a partner, somebody else that can understand and relate to what you're going through, role play a little bit with them. Be like, hey, can I just bounce this off of you? And again, that saying it out loud, that practice and preparation just really helps so much. And then I would say when you're negotiating, be realistic as well. If you do some research and you're like, oh gosh, this job title that I just received, according to some study online, I should be making triple my salary. don't go in and ask for triple your salary. It's not going to happen, most likely. So be realistic. And then lastly, I would say when you are negotiating, always tie it back to business value. So maybe in your head, you're like, gosh, I really want to buy a house, therefore I need to make more money, or whatever it may be. Don't use that as your negotiation. Use the fact that you're responsible for XYZ budget or projects or people or whatever it is, and tie it to that business value that you're being hired or promoted to take on. And always use that as the rationale for why you should get more money, more time off, whatever the thing is that you're trying to negotiate. And on the flip side, same thing in the business world, you might be asking for less, less expense. It's both ways,
Mm-hmm.
but whatever it is, and if it feels fair, acknowledge that too, and don't like nitpick every single thing. Find the thing that feels a little off or that was a maybe a little bit disappointing and go after that. Don't go after 10 things when there's really only two that you were concerned about. All of those things come into play when negotiating, and being fair, being reasonable, but being confident and advocating for your side or yourself, your business, whatever it may be.
One of the biggest mistakes I see when people go in for, say, a raise or a promotion, they say, well, I've been here for a year or I've been here for 2 years. It's like, okay, like, what does that actually mean? What value have you brought to the bottom line, or to, like, to your point, those business goals? So definitely do not say, I've been here, I'm buying a house, I have kids, whatever. Make sure it makes sense for the business to reward you. And then usually if you have that case, you have a strong chance of getting that thing. All right, so you have a vast network, and I think that having people on your side goes a long way in, say, these negotiations. So, how do you think that women can go into their careers, into the workforce, and truly build connections, build relationships that are valuable and not just one sided, right? You don't want to just be asking for something. So, how do you build true connections in the workplace?
I think it goes back to that genuine interest. And so a lot of times there may be somebody that we admire, for example, and we're like, gosh, I would love to learn from them. Don't meet them for the first time and say, hey, Brian, would you be my mentor? That becomes very, then it almost becomes weird, or it almost becomes like you're putting the person on the spot. Instead, be like, gosh, Brian, you have such an amazing background. I would love to learn more about X, Y, and Z, and take that genuine interest, and then continue to build upon the relationship. I think follow up is one of the big things. When I was doing those informational interviews that I mentioned, a lot of times people will do the interview and then they never talk to the person again. So 6, 12 months goes by, and then they're like, oh, hey, I haven't talked to so and so that was so generous that gave me an hour of their time and gave me all this amazing advice, and I loved talking to them, but I haven't followed up in a year. Following up is really important, and it's hard work, honestly, because we get so busy and we have our responsibilities, we have our lives, we have all of the things that are pulling us into all of these different directions, but really making a concerted effort to get to know the person, to follow through with them, to have those consistent conversations. That's really how you're going to build that relationship over time, and really having that genuine interest. And so that, I think, is the biggest way. And just not being afraid to reach out. Again, as we discussed earlier, these things can be a little intimidating sometimes, or a little uncomfortable sometimes. And so just being willing to put yourself out there a little bit, and again, just that consistent follow through and genuine interest, as simple as those things sound, they make such a big difference.
I agree. I agree. So I want to get tactical for just a second here. And my question is, what skills should young professionals double down on right now? Obviously, it's going to have to do with your industry, the role you're going for, but I think there are some that pretty much cross the board when we're talking about getting a job in 2026. So what do you think that they should be concentrating on?
I think that communication skills are incredibly important. In a day and age where we leverage technology for everything, making sure that you can write well and speak well are so important. It's like, it's almost the more advanced we get technologically, the more we need to go a little bit back to basics. And so making sure, can you pick up the phone and have a calm and collected and organized conversation? Can you sit in front of somebody and have a fluid conversation? Can you write, whether it's an email or a paper or whatever, can you write well? And with obviously with technology, most young people have an advantage of having just pretty much grown up with it. Leveraging technology is amazing and we absolutely need to do it, but going a little bit back to basics on some of those skills, like those interactions, that communication ability, both verbal and written, and just being able to go a little bit back to basics. And if you're not sure, maybe ask your parents or ask somebody of a different generation than you, hey, what did you find important? Or what do you think people in my generation are missing? And you have to pick and choose what advice you take, and that goes for anything. But there's going to be some nuggets of some things that you're like, oh gosh, I never thought about that. Yeah, I write all my emails in like text speak or whatnot. I use emojis and everything and shorthand everything, and so that's not exactly always great in the business space. And so being able to understand those things and make sure you're honing the skills that maybe aren't as comfortable too. That's the other thing, is we all have things that we're really good at and we all have things that we need to work on. So I would say don't ignore the things you're good at, continue to make them better, but pick a challenge area. Maybe just pick one to start and start to, it's almost like tapping away at the iceberg, like just gradually start to work on those things so that you're ultimately you're really maximizing the things you're good at and amplifying them, but you're also improving the challenge areas.
Yeah, I like the way that visual of, sure, keep doing what you're doing and doing it well, make it even better, but don't let your weaknesses be your downfall. And you'd be surprised of how being able to lead a sales call, lead a client call, or call a customer when something goes wrong, write an email that your bosses are copied on, all of those things require communication skills, and they can, I won't say necessarily make or break your career, but they can certainly have an impact on it. Absolutely. So I agree with you wholeheartedly. All right, Kim, last question. If you could go back to your college senior self, what would you say to her now?
It's always so hard. We do, of course, have the benefit of like hindsight's always 2020, as they say. I would say don't change anything because we still learn from our mistakes. Like follow the path. So I wouldn't go and be like, remember, you're gonna face this experience. Don't do it, or you're gonna face this experience. Do it different. I wouldn't change things because, again, every experience is valuable. And if I went back and told myself not to make a mistake, that could put me on a whole different trajectory. But I would just tell myself, my younger self, to, again, to be that person, even when it's uncomfortable, that raises her hand, that volunteers, that puts in the extra time and effort. I would tell her to really hone those EQ skills and understanding of people. And as much as you're in your younger career, you're really trying to build yourself and establish yourself, but don't do that at the risk of other people or relationships. So making sure that you're always mindful of the things happening around you, those relationships, and yes, continuing to push yourself to do better, but also doing so in a way that you're making sure you're maintaining relationships, and all of those things is really important. And understanding, again, honing those soft skills of being able to read the room and hone your communication skills and organizational skills and project management skills, all of those things that are really foundational and fundamental to any path we take are definitely things to focus on. I wouldn't change anything, like I said, because every experience, good and bad, is something we learn from. But I would basically just reinforce that you're going to make mistakes and that's okay. You're going to have wins and you should celebrate those wins, but don't become arrogant in the process. Continue to always raise the bar for yourself, and just everything in life is about balance. And so balancing like the good with the bad, the ups and downs, the challenges with the wins, all of those things is important, and just taking every learning experience you can.
Boy, that is reassuring, right? To hear, hey, it's okay to make mistakes and everything's going to pan out okay the way that it should. That is really reassuring to somebody in that role. So I appreciate you saying that. I'm sure they do too. And most of all, I really do appreciate you doing this, speaking to all of these important topics for young women. And I just want to say thank you for being on.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.